Well, recently, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives had a lot to endure. The opposition leader lost two MPs from his caucus in as many days. But there seems to be some drama going on the Liberal side of the aisle. And maybe you won't hear this very much, but our very own Brian Lilley has some background and did a deep dive into what's going on in the Liberal caucus. And I'm Adrienne Batra, and we are joined by Lorrie Goldstein as well. So, Brian, we know that the so-called mainstream media, the Parliament Hill gallery, loves to beat the you know what out of the Conservatives, and they breathlessly report on every movement of every Conservative MP and what's going on in caucus. Uh, that seems to have waned somewhat. You had some interesting background on this drama with d'Entremont, the now former Conservative MP, now Liberal MP. What did you learn about some of those machinations?
Yeah, it's fun beating the gallery at their own game from downtown Toronto, I gotta say. Chris d'Entremont was, the story around him, the narrative is, well, he's just a poor red Tory that wasn't appreciated by his party, and there's an ideological split between the old PCs and the Reform. That split does not exist in the modern day Conservative Party. I've talked to people on also every party has factions, every party. But the idea that there's still this PC reform divide doesn't exist. And let me tell you quickly about d'Entremont. He was an MLA in Nova Scotia from 2003 to 2019. He is a pro-lifer. He is very much a conservative. In 2018, Tim Houston, who's a very middle-of-the-road conservative guy, the current premier, he became leader of the PC party in Nova Scotia in 2018, and Chris d'Entremont ran to Andrew Scheer and said, I don't like Tim Houston. I can't work with him. I want to run for you. Scheer said, yeah, sure, fine. But here's why this matters. He couldn't work with Tim Houston, a moderate middle of the road guy. And now he says, well, Poilievre was so different. He went to Andrew Scheer. Scheer is very much a fiscal hawk like Poilievre is, but he's also a SOCON, just like d'Entremont is. So that takes apart the red Tory thing. As for his party not appreciating or supporting him, in 2023, when Anthony Rota had to resign as speaker because they invited that guy who'd fought for a Nazi unit in the Second World War while Zelensky was in Parliament, the Conservatives didn't think they could get one of their own elected. They were going to back a New Democrat just to play with the Liberals and, show that they didn't control everything. And d'Entremont goes to Poilievre and says, look, boss, I think I can win. Here's why I should do it. Gives him the big sales push. d'Entremont had been in sales before before going into politics. He sells him on it, but then he's a disaster. He has not done any campaigning. Poilievre's putting the entire weight of the OLO behind him. Young staffers are having to give up their Saturdays. MPs are to call MPs. Other MPs are making calls for him. d'Entremont doesn't win, doesn't come close. So then after the election, he wants to run for speaker again. And the party's like, no, we're not backing you. It didn't work out last time, and we don't want to lose a vote. If one of ours is the speaker. He was incredibly sour about that when they didn't back him for deputy speaker, even, after rejecting him as speaker. He walked around talking about, I better go take these knives out of my back. He felt like he was entitled. He didn't get what he felt he was entitled for, including the big pay bump and all of that, and decided to leave. That was a big part of why he went, not that he's some poor,
Yeah.
hard done by red Tory.
Lorrie, I suspect that in a week's time, we are never going to hear that last name anytime soon, d'Entremont. Of course, he's getting his minutes of fame right now because it's intriguing. He crossed the floor and all of that drama that ensued. But now he's just another Liberal MP. And so I guess he should have enjoyed his moments while he had it. But it's not just in conservative circles that there are some challenges. We're reporting, Brian reported just the other day on the front page of the Toronto Sun, the Green Meanies. Mark Carney is facing his own internal strife. Now, liberals have always been much better at keeping their drama behind closed doors rather than letting it spill out, like conservatives always do, Lori. We know that. But there are very real issues that Carney has to contend with too. We've talked about it before that he's got in some cases, an unwieldy caucus with extremes on one side, and in this particular instance, it seems that some of them are not happy about potentially getting rid of that EV mandate.
Yeah, I mean, were it not for Brian reporting from Toronto, you wouldn't know about this intrigue in the Liberal Party, where former environment ministers like John Wilkinson and Stephen Guilbeault are like frustrated about Carney putting a hold on the EV mandate, which is one of the few sane things that the Liberals have done. The EV mandate was not going to work. 20% of cars being sold by next year to be EVs, when right now it's under 8%. And the auto sector said, well, if we do that, we'll just have to sell fewer internal combustion engine cars. So what would that mean? It would mean fewer cars for everybody and higher prices for everybody for EVs. And so, but the whole idea, and then we have things about certain ministers wanting to get appointments where they can leave the government and become ambassadors and all those
Mhm.
kinds of things. The broader point, I think, is that this goes on in every party. The idea that somebody crossing the floor is some earth-shaking event that is going to change politics is just absurd. The Liberals did this because they had a budget they knew wasn't going to be universally applauded, and that, as Brian and others pointed out, fell well short of the idea of generational change. So, of course, they played up this issue. And so it got down to the minutia of, did Andrew Scheer inadvertently strike his assistant? Outremer's, what are you people talking about? When somebody leaves a party, obviously people in the party are going to be concerned and they're going to express that. That's just normal stuff. Utrama strikes me as, and I use the term advisedly, a drama queen. Like, and then, but the bigger part is what Brian talked about. You saw the what I call the Ottawa bubble. The Ottawa bubble of lobbyists, of politicals, of think tanks, of public affairs consultants who are actually lobbyists, going on the media and, oh, this is terrible, da 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 da. And then they would say, and the Liberals, isn't this like Poilievre's in trouble because nobody's talking about the budget? Well, no, you're not talking about the budget. What prevented you from going the same thing? Yeah, look, this wasn't good for Poilievre. He had a bad thing. Now let's get back to his climate competition strategy. Remember they were
Mhm.
telling us about that? There was nothing in that document. I read it. It's 9 pages long. It says nothing. It doesn't advance anything. So this idea of all these bubble people going, oh, well, the political implications, blah, 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 and it's taking focus away from the budget. No. You're taking away focus from the budget. And part of it is that they don't like Poilievre. Ottawa, what we call the Laurentian elite, they don't like Poilievre, and they're settling scores. I mean, it's so obvious. You go and look at the news aggregator sites. I'm sitting there, 6 columns about Pierre Poilievre in the week of the budget.
Mhm.
You just sort of go, okay, I mean, I'm going to write about the fact that the current shortage of doctors across Canada was a deliberate policy by provincial
Mhm.
governments. I'm going to read the climate competitives strategy and go and look at it and assess it compared to what he said in the election. But, but I just, day after day, with he crossed the floor. Get a grip. There's hundreds of politicians who cross the floor. Liberals cross the floor to the Conservatives in the last parliament. It's a one-day wonder. That's all it is.
Well, it should have been a one day wonder. And Brian, I just want you to wrap this up for us because recently Poilievre was just asked, as of yesterday, are you going to change your leadership style because of these two MPs leaving caucus. And I mean, I liked his answer. He just flatly said no, because it doesn't seem that they want to get the context around it more. We don't know all the reasons why the Alberta MP resigned, says for family reasons. We know why D'Entremont did, thanks to your reporting, but is Carney's not getting asked those questions?
Carney's not making himself available for questions until later today with
He,
his big mine issue. And you know what? There's an issue in the media right now about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and Donald Trump. Lots of questions to him about that. You know who won't be asked about it and has only been asked about it indirectly is Mark Carney being photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell. And,
Mhm.
how is that even possible? Carney will not get questions about trouble in his own caucus. They'll just go to Poilievre. I like the fact that Poilievre said, well, why aren't you asking about the trouble in the Liberal Party? I expect breathless reporting on that. Not going to happen. We know how most of the media works. This is why we are outliers in this business, because we don't go with what the Ottawa bubble is doing or saying. But that's why we're able to break stories that they dare not talk about.
Well, the political drama carries on in all caucuses, and this is just a reality, but we probably won't hear about it breathlessly reported from the Liberals like we did on the Conservatives. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to the TorontoSun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.